And coming up on the next topic, Gary and is moderating a panel. The topic is carbon neutrality strategies, achieving net zero emissions across data center. And joining him will be Mr. Niranpal Singh from BayWa APAC. And sorry for missing this. Engineer Noor is Iziddin Abdullah. He's from North Consult Engineering.
Good to come back to this stage. I think this year is even larger than last year, and it's like many times larger than 3-4 years back. And solar or renewable energy has become more and more important topic along the way. So today I'm glad to have two persons that are in the industry, and we hope to hear and learn a bit more insight from both gentlemen. So the first gentleman is for Engineer Iziddin. Can you share with us, when it comes to renewable energy or net zero in Malaysia for the powering data center, are we talking solely about solar, or is there any other forms that are available in Peninsula for new projects?
Okay, thank you, Gary. So I think in terms of the renewable energy supply for data center in Malaysia, so basically the most bankable, the most feasible so far is the solar and also energy storage. Nuclear is only under the federal. Hydro is under the utility. Biomass, biogas is quite small. It's a 10% or less from the total renewable energy. And then what else? Hydrogen is still long way to go. CCUS still long way to go. So the most bankable is always solar and energy storage, because solar, I think, is already, we are the third lowest of cost of doing solar in Asia, especially ASEAN, after China and also India. So far the most feasible is solar plus energy storage. Yeah, back to you.
Thank you. That's helped us to frame the discussion today a little bit. And now, since that, I have this question for Niranpal. From your conversation with the user, are they thinking of offsetting? Because our topic is net zero. So if you offset 1% or 5%, you are not net zero, you are net 95. So are they thinking about 100% offset, or are they thinking about partial offset in the next 2-3 years?
Yeah, I mean, that's generally a good question, Gary, because typically when we start conversations with the corporates or even data centers, right, they start off by saying that they've committed to netting zero, or they've committed to RE100, which means that they are definitely interested in solar or renewable sources. However, as the conversation progresses, they start to understand the cost of renewables or the cost of going net zero most of the time is not basically aligned with what they expect. So they always have this misconception that having solar can be cheap. It is true for on-site solar, because typically the systems that you put up or deploy on your roof can be relatively cheap. As Iziddin has pointed out, Malaysia is not that expensive when it comes to deploying solar. However, when we speak about larger scale, it can basically get a bit more expensive. And then the question becomes the willingness of the corporate to actually invest or kind of pick up the additional cost of going towards net zero. But typically, I would say that what we have seen is that corporates do take it one step at a time, and they don't entirely offset 100%.
So hearing from the sell side, maybe we hear from Iziddin a little bit, because he deals with a bit more as a consultant. He deals with a few parties, both the buy and sell side. How should data centers position themselves or strategize their renewable energy strategy in Malaysia in that context?
Okay, related to that question, I think for the time being, most of the industry are trying to do something like a greenwashing, either subscribe to the renewable energy certificate or even the green elective tariff. Green elective tariff from the utility, you need to resubscribe every 6 months. Whereas for the renewable energy certificate, if I'm not mistaken, you can only do like a -2. You can claim for the past 2 years. So let's say you claim for year 2026, you can claim from year 2024 to 2026. So the most feasible so far is doing solar. But again, we have some worry in terms of the foreign investment, whether are they going to be here in the next 5, 10 or 15 years when the infrastructure of the high voltage substation, high voltage transmission already been laid further. So in terms of that, what you can do, I think our neighbor at the south, which is Singapore, some of their entity already start subscribing or intention to subscribe the scheme called CREST. So beside the self-consumption. So CREST is either you do the data center for, let's say you operate in Singapore, you want to set up a data center in Malaysia because you are Science-Based Targets Index or even RE100, then you can subscribe to that CREST scheme. So you deal with the developer. If other than that, there's another option you can go into, which is a cross-border energy scheme, CBES. So there's a CREST scheme and also CBES. So the challenges part will be among ASEAN countries. I think we are the most developed. And then another thing is that another risk is that, or challenges is the 5 types of agreement that you need to undergo or you need to go through to get the renewable energy scheme. So I think we have here Vietnam to Malaysia for wind, Sarawak hydro to Singapore to Malaysia. So the most feasible is always from Malaysia. So I think hydro from Sarawak and also wind turbine from Vietnam still on study, but the most feasible is always solar plus energy storage. So I think with the current rate of 5 cent USD per kilowatt hour for solar or less than 100 USD per kilowatt hour for energy storage, if you are looking into 4 hours of battery backup, that would be the most feasible, provided what you as a customer of taker, you sign not 5 years, 10 years, but 15 or 20 years, because most of the renewable energy plant in Malaysia, we are looking into 21 years of power purchase agreement. Yeah.
Sorry, Iziddin, I clarify a bit. Just now you mentioned the numbers 5 cents for solar and for energy storage.
Below 100 USD per kilowatt hour.
Oh, okay.
For 4 hours,
Yep.
at a minimum 400 to 600 megawatt hour
Okay.
at a big scale.
Okay. So maybe I switch the questions back a bit to Niranpal. Quick questions. Are people looking for, are data centers thinking of new projects or they're thinking of buying from renewable energy? Maybe I hear from you.
So, generally speaking, projects that have existed during LSS, the attributes, the environmental attributes are basically passed on to TMB, right? So TMB uses those attributes and they transfer it if you subscribe to GET, the green tariff. So most likely you are not able to subscribe for longer periods, or you might get probably a 1 or 2% offset, which means that most of the data centers have to basically pair up or look ahead towards new projects coming online. However, as Iziddin also put it, the question then becomes the bankability, because there's these 5 agreements, right? And the agreement that kickstart the whole conversation is basically the PPA, which means the seller's willingness to sell and the buyer's willingness to buy at the commercial terms set out. Now, this is important because we have this issue of bankability. For LSS projects, generally, the off-taker is TMB, so they are bankable. You can get a project finance, and typically, we know that prices have come down because it's just solar only, right? So it's much lighter on the economics as well. But when we consider CREST or larger projects, the question becomes the bilateral agreement and the quality of the bilateral agreement, and how do you basically finance that?
Maybe I have a question that I throw to 2 gentlemen. In terms of CREST, there is talk about the data center players are standing on the sideline, and in terms of, like you mentioned, it's willing buyer, willing seller. There seems to be some unwillingness that lingering around, although in the market, what I heard is that this unwillingness has now shrunk a bit or reduced substantially. The questions I throw to you guys, on the ground, do you still hear unwillingness? And the second part of the questions to both gentlemen is that over the next 1 to 2 years, how much CREST solar farms are going to be built in terms of gigawatt?
So Yeah, maybe I can kick off the question first. So, I mean, when we started with CRESS, obviously it was a push from the sector as well as from the corporates. So they basically pushed it, and then the government said, ministry said, okay, fine, let's open up. What they needed to open up is grid access, and that came with a price, right? So when CRESS was launched, the system access charge, which is basically like a toll, right, that you need to pay to procure the energy, because typically your plant is in probably the northern location and you're offsetting with someone down south. So that came as a shock. That was the first shock, right? That the system access charge was relatively high, plus it came with a battery component. There was a lot of ambiguity as to the technicals in relation to the battery, but a couple of months after, GSO actually had a session and they basically clarified. So the industry then accepted a certain price point, and the issue has been that there were too many players that were kind of getting themselves ready with projects, and they had access to only a small group of buyers. So imagine, I mean, a pool where you have unfiltered sellers coming to you with all sorts of prices, all sorts of projects, and you do not know which one, you know, what's the quality of the project, which one would get built, and so on. So there was that first confusion, and it took a lot of time. And we also noticed that buyers then engaged with consultants. Some of them had RFPs to basically understand a little bit deeper and further. And I would say that today it's a little bit different because the buyers themselves are educated. So they are aware, they have kind of filtered out, and they understand, you know, who might build a project versus someone that's just coming with a price point and they maybe don't even have the land option, right? So this is that difference. And for LSS projects, the difference is that you need to perform power studies, you need to have land option, everything locked in. For CRESS, you do not. Your CRESS only begins when you sign the PPA or the term sheet, and then you start the connection agreement, etc. Right? So it's a little bit, a bit of a difference in that sense. So I think generally, as you put it, Gary, why the sellers or the buyers are on the fence is because of this trust issue, in my view. Right?
Okay, related to that question, if I'm not mistaken, currently renewable energy in Malaysia, we have around 5 gigawatt. 4 gigawatt is from solar. So we are going to approaching 15 gigawatt by 2030. And by the time we are all outdated by 2050, I think the country is target between 30 to 35 gigawatt by 2050. So there's a room for solar expansion. But again, like what my colleague said, I think is the issue on this energy storage is related to the solar and also CRESS is due to we have 5 types of agreement, and then like my colleague mentioned just now, there are so many developers trying to come up with a very creative proposal. So in the end, what I can say, if data center now are paying ultra high voltage with the effective tariff between 60 to 80 cent or around 10 to 15 cent USD, so most probably you need a solar and also energy storage at the cost of below 15 or 20 cent. But the problem is that since due to the competitive tariff of solar for the past decades, our solar become too cheap. So I think the whole country now want to make the solar renewable energy become more exclusive, more premium. But the problem is that due to current competitive from tender LSS1, large scale solar farm number 1 until 5 plus, so the rate tariff from 50 cent become below 15 cent. If you convert into USD, it's not 5 cent, it's a 4 cent USD per dollar, so become too far stretched. So in the end, most of the equipment for inverter, energy storage, and also panel is not from the global north, it's from the mainland. So to balance all this, there are some funders also don't require any financing interest. So they are looking into weighted average cost capital below 5%. Sorry, below 5%. So with the IRR 5, 6, 7, 4, 6, so the cost is become too low. But I think in the end, what make our countries better from other countries is that we always come up with a new update on Act, Bylaw, Standard, Guideline, Roadmap, Outlook on energy every month. For the past 3 years, we have seen a lot of update being introduced in in more than 10 scheme of renewable energy for the past 3 years. I think that's where the market also sometimes can become confused. But again, what I would like to stress here, even with all this confusion, again, our cost of doing business, especially when it comes to levelized cost of energy, you compare with the tariff, you compare with the levelized cost of storage, you compare with the tariff, we are still among the lowest, or I can say the lowest in ASEAN after China and India. Yeah, back to you.
I have 30 seconds for one final question. Niranpal, can you tell us a little bit of your pipeline project?
Yeah, so generally we have land that we have secured and we are looking to develop. So, the numbers are not big. I would say that generally, we could develop up to 800 megawatts in the next couple of years, but our target is basically to kind of proceed and maybe deliver up to 300 megawatts in the next probably 1-2 years. And obviously, with good quality off-takers as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I think our times are up. Thank you, and good that the sharing has been both commercial and technical as well as future forward-looking. Thank you very much.